Hello and welcome to Somatic Approaches in Therapy Summit. My name is Raymond Rodriguez. I am a clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience in community based clinical practice. A little bit about my clinical interests, they are in the areas of immigration, of diversity and otherness, LGBTQ, AI plus empowerment, spirituality, and working with marginalized communities. And in the last decade, I have become a trauma specialist assisting clients with complex psychological trauma and post traumatic stress disorder. I am certified in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and sensory motor psychotherapy, where I am also currently on faculty with the Institute. And I am truly delighted to be here today to present on a topic that is very dear to me, somatic awareness and somatic exercises that can be integrated into any form and any model of psychotherapy that you are currently practicing. And so to begin with, I would like to pose a question, and a question that for me is sort of like the starting point of any curiosity around somatic psychotherapy. And that is, why and how do we integrate the body into therapy? And so, what I always like to say about this question, which is one that I'm often asked, is that the body is truly a much more faithful source of information. And I'll say that again, the body is a much more faithful source of information. I also like to think that the body never lies. And when we turn our attention to our bodies and we learn to befriend our bodies, we actually have access to a much more greater source of information that can be very, very useful for the clients in the therapy, but also for the client's well being. And I think also that this is true for all of us as therapists. We also know now, with the plethora of research that has been done, that our bodies hold feelings, that feelings are not separate from our bodies and also our minds. And so, we now know, again, through much research, that the bodies and that our bodies and our nervous systems are truly intertwined. And so when a client says, I am depressed, they're not just saying that as a statement of what they're feeling or their affective experience, but they're also saying that in a way that they're feeling it in their bodies, right? So similarly, when we're happy or when we're joyous, it is also an experience that we feel throughout our bodies. It is not just a feeling. Um, when we're joyous and when we're happy, our energy tends to go up, and we're kind of exuberant, and our gestures also reflect that. Conversely, when we're depressed, the opposite is true. Our energy tends to go downward, and our bodies tend to collapse in response. And these are things that I'll be talking about later in this presentation. Also, a belief among somatic practitioners is that our bodies are always aiming towards health and well being. Our bodies always want to heal. And so, from that perspective, the role of the therapist is to support the processing of whatever material, and in many cases, of traumatic material that is getting in the way of the body and the mind's ability, innate ability, truly to heal. And so that is how I enter this work, is how do I support in processing and working with whatever material that is getting in the way from this particular client's body to tap into their own innate healing. Our bodies are always communicating with us, and we often feel things in our bodies before we have a full cognitive or even affective understanding of what's happening. And one very good example that I like to share with my clients and in presentations is that our language actually has many, many examples where we use the felt sense in our bodies to describe experiences. So, one that is familiar to many of us is when we say, I have a gut feeling, right? Or I have a bad feeling about this, right? What we're really saying here, or what we're referencing, is that we're sensing in our bodies that something is not quite right, and yet we don't fully necessarily understand it cognitively or have a way of describing it, right? So when I have a gut feeling, it's that I know something doesn't feel quite right, but I don't quite know what it is, right? Again, we're using the language of the body here to describe an inner experience that doesn't quite yet have words. A couple of more that are familiar to me, that may be familiar to you, is when we say, I want to get something off my chest, right? Is wanting to release something, often a feeling or an opinion that I have, right? And I'm using, once again, the language of the body, getting something off our chest to as a segue to describe what I'm feeling and an opinion. And another one is butterflies in my stomach, right? Like I feel some butterflies, right? To describe a state usually of stress or anxiety. So as you can see, our bodies are very much part of our consciousness and in our language, and that we often utilize them to describe things that we are feeling inside, or thoughts or experiences that we are having. So the invitation is to more fully tap into this wisdom of the body in our practice. So where do we start, right? How do we begin to integrate the body more fully into our practice? How do I do this? And I always like to say that it starts with us, the therapist, the parallel process of the therapist in the therapy. I am of the opinion that when I am with somebody, all of who I am is present with me. That I cannot check myself, my feelings, my identity, what's happening in my body from the therapeutic space and from what's happening in the room, but rather the opposite, that I can embrace it and that I can use the information of my own body that I'm experiencing as I sit with clients as information that informs interventions. So I think that a good place to start integrating more the body into therapy is with us. And so how do we do this, right? So a quick analogy, right, that I like to use, and I use a lot of analogies in my practice, is that, most of us have a computer or a smartphone, and many of us may even drive a car, right? So with all these devices, right, it's actually quite useful if you familiarize yourself and some of its basic functions in order to use them more effectively. So the same thing with our bodies in our lives and also in therapy. So the invitation here is for you, the therapist, to become more familiar with your own body. Questions that you can ask yourself is, do you truly believe in the wisdom of your own body? How has that innate wisdom show up in your lives in the past or even right now? Another good question is, where do you wish that you have been more curious about your body in a particular moment in time? Or how familiar are you with your own body? How do you relate to your own body even right now as you're listening to this talk? How do you relate to your body right now? Is your body a friend or a foe? Are you indifferent about your own body? How familiar are you with your inner experience? What kind of relationship do you currently have with your body? And these are questions that, again, can be so robust and can give us so much information about our current relationship with our bodies. Another way to start is to become very familiar with our bodies in the parallel process with our clients. In becoming familiar with our own bodies as we're inviting our clients to do the same, it becomes a kind of modeling. So it's not only that the client is doing it, but we're also very engaged in a very similar process with ourselves. I also think that when we as therapists have familiarity and curiosity with with our own bodies, we participate in the gestalt of the experience. We tend to have more confidence and trust in the use of somatic interventions if we ourselves come into bringing this material with our clients, if we have some familiarity for ourselves with it. Um, Other options that I find that could be very helpful if you are curious about how to bring the body more into your practice is training on therapeutic models that place the body front and center. I practice sensory motor psychotherapy, and that is one way or one training that you can take. And there are others. Sensory motor is certainly not the only one. There's also many books right now and workshops and even free information and workshops and trainings through social media and platforms like, say, YouTube, that you can easily access. I also think that if you are seeking your own therapy, you can find a therapist that practices somatically so that you have a first-hand experience also on what it is that you can do through your own therapeutic process. And another way that I think is very easy and inexpensive to bring more curiosity to your own body is to practice activities that are geared towards discovering the wisdom of the body. Things like yoga, tai chi, qigong, martial arts, or even a mindful walk in the park can give you a tremendous amount of information about the workings of your own body. So you may already be engaging in these activities. So the invitation here is to pay attention to your body as you are engaging in these activities. That is a completely different practice than just attending a yoga class or going for a walk or you're listening to music. If you go for a walk in the park with an awareness of your body, so, for instance, things as, being aware of the temperature and as it changes as you're walking, or your pacing, or your posture, or having a sense of five sense perception, things that you're hearing, things that you're seeing, smells that are around you, what the felt sense of the ground is as my feet touch the ground. These are all mindful experiences of your body as you are engaging in that walk. It's a very different experience if you're just sort of walking mindlessly, right? Because you got to get somewhere or you're walking, for the sake of exercising. Another very good practice that I have integrated into my life that I also encourage you to try is to simply check in with your bodies regularly by asking yourself a question. How is my body doing right now? And it might seem like a duh question, but truly think about it. How often do you turn to your body on a regular basis? Our culture and most of us, are outside of your bodies, or our attention is outwardly driven. What do I have to do? Where do I have to be? The next thing that I have to engage with. We don't always cultivate an inner checking in, a turning the mirror inwardly and checking in with how am I doing. Oftentimes, the only access we have to our bodies are things like when I'm hungry, when I'm in pain, or when I'm tired. but this is something that you can also bring in more regularly and also practice it. How is my body doing right now? What is the felt sense? What am I sensing right now? Yeah. And so now I like to turn to working with clients, right? Like, how do I begin to bring this work with my clients? And I'd like to start by saying that many therapy models, certainly this was my experience when I went to graduate school and in many trainings that I took, that many models don't explicitly integrate the soma, the body, in the therapy. And so, if you're one of these therapists that is coming into this workshop with a curiosity about integrating the body into your practice, but this is not something that you've been in training with or that you've explored yourself, this can be a total paradigm shift for you. And so, what I like to say is that don't panic. Yeah, you don't have to worry about this. There are many somatic interventions that you can easily integrate into whatever modality you are working from right now. An overarching recommendation, if this is very new for you and it may feel scary or completely out of your comfort zone, is to just start small. Yeah, is to just bite size or just try little things here and there to build your confidence. When I was starting to practice more somatic, and this was also very new for me, I started very small, and as I felt into clients having more curiosity and seeing the benefits of working somatically for myself and also for my clients, I began to build more confidence, more trust, and this became more of interventions that were in my tool bag that I would turn to more readily. So go slow in integrating somatic interventions into your practice. And also, I would say that this is important if you have an existing practice, right, and you've been practicing with some clients for a long time from a different perspective and from a different modality, say more talk therapy, to suddenly begin to integrate the body, that may feel a little dissonant to what you're doing and it may lead to ruptures, right? So we want to be careful about that too. So go slow, bring in very small pieces and see how it goes and allow for that confidence to build. A good way to bring in more somatic interventions to with clients that you've been working with already is through psychoeducation. You may introduce the body with a client through some very simple psychoeducation. Things like what I mentioned before about the wisdom of the body, or the research that we now have around how the body participates in the gestalt of our experience. This could be very simple ways of bringing in psychoeducation that clients can relate to, or to reference things like, when you feel depressed and how you feel your energy kind of drop, that is what I mean, that the body is very much also a part of your experience. Another way of psychoeducation that I have found abundantly helpful is things like reference books, right? That clients can also read to become more familiar about what the literature, what the research already says about this. So it's not just coming from me, it's actually coming from a robust body of literature that is out there right now, that it is very, very helpful for clients to reference. So some of the books that I like and that my clients have benefited from are The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, who is also a speaker at the summit. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine is another wonderful book as well. When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate, or Becoming Safely Embodied by Jidra Fay. These are all excellent reference sources of information that you can recommend to clients and actually that you can read together. Let's say you and your client can agree to read chapter one together, and at a coming session, discuss it, right? And what was that like for you? What did you learn? Some of these books also include exercises that you and your client can practice in your existing therapy. Another very useful way of bringing the body into the work is by drawing from the client's experience. Clients are often disconnected from what in sensory motor psychotherapy we call the present moment experience. And the present moment experience is always connected to what we feel in our bodies. And this is actually particularly true for traumatized clients. There is a disconnection from the body. So, bringing attention to how the client's body is participating in their experience in the here now can be a very useful way of, again, segueing or bringing in more fully the body into practice. And it can lead to generating more curiosity on somatic interventions, and they can be useful for the client. So, for instance, when a client talks about stress, like I'm very stressed, and you notice how their shoulders come up, right, or how their energy, tends to go upward if they're anxious, or how they avert the eyes or are kind of looking everywhere, right? So these are things that you can very gently notice. Oh, I noticed that as you talk about this issue, it's almost like the stress is here with us right now, that your energy is going up. Do you notice that? Or conversely, when a client is speaking about depression and their head hangs or the shoulders collapse, right? Or they're almost like drooping in the chair, you can, again, bring attention very gently to that present moment experience that is happening right now. And you can say something like, I see how you're depressed right now. It's like your body, your shoulders are dropping. It's almost like you're slipping out of the chair right now. Do you notice that? Can we bring some attention to that? So, as you can see in these interventions and in the language that I'm using, I'm very gently bringing attention to the body and drawing from what I'm observing and from what's happening right now in the body. If a client does not have curiosity to explore that, that's okay. We can let it go. And later on in the session or next time, we can make another comment. I promise you that eventually some curiosity will begin to spark. Another powerful way that I find of introducing the body in treatment is through modeling. As you draw from the client experience in the ways that I describe, you yourself as the therapist can model with your own body what you're observing in the client's body. And so this can also lead to curiosity, because not only are you naming verbally what you're noticing in the client's body, but you're also showing them through modeling that experience. So, for instance, for the client that is coming in and is depressed and there's that collapse, you may say, I'm seeing that collapse, and it's almost like your shoulders are dropping like this and your head is hanging like this. Now your client is also observing you, and that may prompt for them some more curiosity in exploring that. Many of my clients, when I modeled in this way, are surprised, because as they were focused on the depression and perhaps the sadness that they were experiencing, they may not necessarily be noticing how their bodies are also participating in that depression and that sadness. Um, at times, it may be hard to obtain buy in from clients in working somatically. Clients may not be interested, or that may feel woo woo, or that may feel so different to what you're already be doing with them that they may not have any curiosity. That's okay too. You don't have to beat them with that, over the head with this. You can, again, bite size or titrate bringing the body by starting small, so you can integrate very small pieces in the existing therapy in ways that it may already be resonant with the client. So here's a quick example, right? So a client is coming in, and this client may be anxious, right? You may invite them to feel into the ground with their feet, right? As they're talking about, I am so anxious and I don't know what to do, right? They may be doing this hand motions, right? And so you may just say, can we try something? We call in sensory motor, we call this mini experiments. Can we try something? And the client says, what? And you say, well, I was thinking, like, what would it be like if you just very gently feel your feet on the ground, right? What you're doing, again, this is a language of sensory motor now, you're challenging, momentarily interrupting the automaticity of that anxious state by bringing in a resource, right? By bringing in some grounding. And so say that the client says, yeah, sure. So just bring attention to your feet right now as you sense into that anxiety. Just feel your feet on the client on the ground, and just notice what happens as you hold attention there, right? Um, Another thing that you can do as you're sensing the ground is, what about if you just bring your hands and you just kind of tap very gently, just feeling your body, feeling your shoulders, feeling your arms, or even feeling your legs with your own hands, right? That is another very micro somatic exercise that often, as I said earlier, interrupts the automaticity of that anxious state and begins to build in some of that buy-in. Um, so you may also build curiosity where the client is already showing some curiosity. So let's say if in doing one of these exercises that I just mentioned, it leads to some positive result. Let's say again, the anxious client feels their feet on the ground, and they feel slightly calmer, right? You may add and you may elaborate it by doing things like, well, how about if we try now pressing with your feet on the ground? Yeah, like what happens as you press and as you engage now the muscles of your legs in not only just sensing into your feet on the ground, but pressing very gently. Yeah. Or what about if we rock your feet back and forth, right? Bringing your feet all the way to the toes and then to your heels, and then bringing your feet sideways and inward. Right. So, what happens as you do that? Right? Do you feel calmer? Do you feel more anxious? Right. So, if there's curiosity and they already feel better, you can build on this somatic exercise, and the hopes is that it will deepen into the positive experience. Another thing that I like about this sort of micro somatic exercise is that actually they can be quite playful and lighthearted. Very often it's because I like to bring laughter, because as you probably know, laughter is resourcing. So for clients, when we engage in these activities, I may say something like, look at that, you are paying me for, just helping you press your feet on the ground. And clients laugh. And that is resourcing also, right? So these exercises could be lighthearted, could be fun. And so you may also invite the clients to co-create and be part of the experience. Hey, you, since this feels good and you're feeling calmer, like what else can we add here? What about, and the client may say something like kicking my leg. So let's try it together, right? And then the client engages in kicking the legs. And what happens now? And what can we do? So how about if we stand and we do it standing? That can be another suggestion, right? So again, you can elaborate it going with the buy-in and bringing in some of that lightheartedness. I like that cliche that says that we attract more bees with honey, right? So the same thing here, right? So rather than, again, beating the client on the head with the somatic exercises as a top down, we can build on the buy-in, on the curiosity where there's already something positive happening. We can elaborate it. Um, Another beautiful thing that I love about working somatically is that we don't need to get it right. I don't need to have the answer. I can relax, I can trust the process, and I can bring in that lightheartedness, that playfulness. So, in an exercise like what I just shared with you, that we're just co creating it together, again, I don't need to know where it's going to lead, or I don't have to have a specific script that we need to try this for 10 minutes, right? Like I can just kind of roll with it, right? Do you want to keep with this? Keep trying. I can ask the client, do you want to try something else, or does it feel like we can stop, right? I don't have to hold that this is the way to do it. We can co-create it together. We can have fun with it. And if the client, doesn't have a curiosity, then we stop and we keep on working in a different way. I also like to say, and particularly if you're starting or have curiosity in working somatically, I often find much more fruitful to integrate the body in therapy through positive experiences rather than negative ones. So let me give you an example here. Say a client comes in and shares that, I went to the park this weekend and had a wonderful time, right? You can get curious about what felt wonderful about that walk in the park. Oh, wow, it sounds like that walk in the park was very impactful. So tell me about it. What happened? What was wonderful about that? Right? And the client tells you, well, it is spring and the flowers and the trees, and I felt so happy and relaxed, right? So then you can ask them, and is that right here, right now, as you remember that memory? Now we're bridging from the memory of something that happened this weekend to the here now. Again, we're going back to the present experience. Are you sensing that relaxation right now? Chances are that yes. The client says yes, I can feel it. So then you can invite them. So how about we just hang out with that? We just stay for a moment with that positive experience, with that relaxation that you're feeling right now in the present as you recall that memory of that walk in the park, right? So we're using the very same mechanism, right? But with a positive experience, right? So the client comes in with this positive experience and you're introducing the body, likely they would be more curious and more buy-in in exploring it somatically through, again, this positive experience. Um, if you want to work more somatically in your existing practice, I think it is very, very useful to develop a robust somatic language. I find that therapists are familiar with the language of affect and cognition, but very often they're unfamiliar with the language of the body. The language of the body is sensation. So, for example, a client may say, "I feel pain in my chest," and of course, we're talking about emotional pain here. I feel a heaviness in my chest. Yeah, and you may invite further exploration of that heaviness or that pain with asking granular questions such as, is that heaviness sharp or does it feel dull? How intense is it? Very intense, medium, low intense? Or does that heaviness, does it have a weight to it? Does it feel hollow? Does it feel like a hole? Is it more towards the front of your body or the back of your body? Does it have a sense of temperature? Does that heaviness, does it have an energetic sense of direction? Again, we're getting very granular here and bringing in language to support the exploration of this heaviness. And by so doing, we're also deepening into the gestalt of that emotional heaviness that is here right now. Another set of questions that I like to ask is, how do you feel towards this heaviness and this pain right there in your chest? Is there aversion? Is there curiosity? Is there resentment? Is there sadness? How do you feel towards it? That in and of itself can be a very important piece of the work, because where there's aversion, it will be harder to befriend that experience. As I said a moment ago, the language of the body is primarily sensations, but it also includes movement, which are macro and micro movement, and five sense perception. This is how the body communicates with us, and it could be very helpful for us to learn more about the body from these perspectives: sensation, movement, and five sense perception. Today, in the interest of time, I'm just focusing on sensation. Most of us are attuned to our bodies actually without knowing it, with things as I mentioned a moment ago, when we're hungry or when we need to go to the bathroom, in pain, or when we are sleepy. Or, as I said also earlier, when we have things like a gut feeling about something, we can, however, begin to cultivate befriending our bodies, being more curious of our bodies. So again, I want to bring in that question that I posed a moment ago. How am I doing? How is my body doing right now? Right? But how am I doing begins to be a little bit more expansive. Again, it is challenging that outward attention that is so true to Western culture, and turning the mirror inward and checking in. And I also help clients, when we ask that question, how am I doing? I will be speaking to this a little bit more later, but helping clients with a menu about that, and also building a menu for ourselves. Another very helpful way that I like to develop a somatic language is through things like charts. Right now on the internet, if you do, somatic language, you will find a lot of charts and PDF documents and lists of the language of sensations. You can read also books such as the ones that I mentioned earlier, that are also going to support your deepening and having a much more elaborate language to understand inner experience. So, for instance, thinking again of depressed clients, whose posture, depressed clients oftentimes have a posture of collapse, and that energetically the energy is kind of going downward. You can bring in a small exercise around alignment, right? And so then you can instruct them, say something like, how about, we roll our shoulders back and down and feel into the alignment. What do you notice now? Yeah. So this is again another mini exercise around beginning to build a robust language for understanding inner sensation. And here are very three specific ways that I like to bring in the body into therapy. These again come in directly from sensory motor psychotherapy, but they can be very easily integrated into an existing therapy. I have kind of mentioned them before, but I want to highlight them here very, very specifically. So the first one is noticing the body, and this is just a very gentle approach to integrating the body into the therapy, just by noticing the body through processing, right? So it's very simple statements, such as, when you talk about that incident that happened at work, your face tilts, or, you seem to tighten, right? You're just making a very specific, gentle statement about what you're noticing in the client's body somatically around their processing, talking about this particular experience. Conversely, with a positive experience, right? Like, I went to the park and I had a wonderful time, right? You can say, wow, you light up, your face lights up, or that brings a smile to your face when you talk about that. Yeah. So the second way of bringing in the body into therapy is by asking open-ended somatic questions. So it could be something like, when you talk about, that incident at work, where do you hold that tension right now? Say the client was talking about, I feel very tense about this incident at work, so where do you hold that tension in your body right now as you talk about that incident at work? Or you can ask, again, another uh, open-ended question, or, what happens in your body, or what do you notice inside as you talk about that incident at work? So these are open-ended questions. Now, one very useful way is also to include menus. So here's an example of that, because clients have an easier time, relating or attaching to a menu. Think about, when you were in school, the difference between a question on a test versus a multiple choice question, right? A multiple choice limits the amount of possible answers or possibilities, right? So a client will have a much easier time picking a word from a menu, or disagreeing with the menu, or approximating a menu. They're just coming up with, again, an answer to an open-ended question, right? So then, what does that look like, right? So it could be something like, when you talk that. About that tension, that you felt with that incident at work, right? So is that tension sharp, or is it dull, or is it more a heaviness or an emptiness, right? What's the quality of that tension right now, right? And again, all of these are somatic questions based on a menu, right? Or when a client says, I feel an emptiness inside, you could say, well, is that emptiness? Is that a hollow emptiness? Or does that feel like a hole, right? Or, so how does that emptiness feel to you right this moment, right? So again, I'm giving a very specific menu there, two choices to be specific, that the client can say, yeah, it's like a hollowness, right? Or if it feels like a hole, that heaviness, feels like a rock, right? So whatever it is, right? If you offer it, the client again can sense into it. Or as I said a moment ago, it's not quite that, is this, right? So it's an approximation to what you're already offered. The client can say, no, it's none of that, and it's something completely different. right? So these are just, again, some very, very specific ways of integrating the body in therapy. And so, what I like to do now is to give you some very specific exercises. I've been giving you some ways of integrating the body in therapy, and now I want to share with you some very, very specific exercises that again can be integrated into any therapeutic modality that you're already practicing. Um, but I like to, before I give you these exercises, I like to make a caveat here. I work with a lot of traumatized clients, as I said in my introduction about my work. And by and large, clients that have been traumatized, that are traumatized right now, are quite phobic of their bodies. They may feel that their bodies betrayed them, that their bodies may be the last place that they want to be. If this is the case, you do not pressure or impose any of these exercises or trying to bring awareness to the body, but rather you work with curiosity, and specifically with the curiosity around the negative feeling that comes up as they consider a different relationship with their bodies. Again, the negative feelings that may come up as they consider a different relationship with their bodies. So, one way to do this is by simply asking again the traumatized client that is phobic of their bodies if they wish to have a different, more positive relationship with their bodies. More clients will answer, yes, I would like that. Yes, I would like to feel differently about the body, about my body. We can then explore that yes. And so we may ask the client, so just let's stay with that yes. What happens when you imagine being able to have a different, more positive relationship with your body sometime in the future? By the way, this is a form of titration, right? I'm not fully into being able to have a positive relationship with the body, but I can imagine having one into the future. So you can then ask questions like, or do you feel that yes inside? That yes around sometime in the future, having a better relationship with my body? What feelings or thoughts or images go with that yes, with imagining having that positive experience with my body? Is there an image of what that would look like if you into the future had a positive relationship with your body? What would be different? What's the image? What do you imagine life would be like? How would you relate with your body then? Yeah. Anticipate, if you engage in this exploration with traumatized clients, anticipate that there will be protest, that there will be a no, or what in somatic experiencing is called a pendulation. That as you go for the positive, the yes, right? I would like into the future to have a positive relationship, that at some point is going to pendulate to the no, that the protest is going to come up. Don't freak out. This is not that you or your client have done anything wrong, but rather that this is how their body is wired right now. Or if you resonate with the language of parts, that you, as you are beginning to work with a part that is looking towards well being, that another more protected part that has been supporting the client around the hypervigilance of the no, that part is going to show up. So then what we do in this instance is that also we become curious about the no. Yeah. So what does that no feel like right now? Yeah. So then momentarily we pause the yes and now we go for the no. What's that no like? Where do you feel that no inside? How strong is that no for you right now? Yeah, what's the feeling that goes with that no? Is there a memory? Is there an image that goes with that no? Yeah. And so these are just, again, some ways that we can begin to bring this material with traumatized clients that may be phobic with the body. But say that there are, a percentage of your clients, of your practice, where there could be more of a curiosity and a buy-in. So here are some very specific ways for to be exact of bringing very specific exercises into your existing practice to bring in the body. So the first one is what I call the present moment experience, which I mentioned before in this talk. At any given time, much is happening inside of all of us. Our bodies are always communicating with us. And if you care to turn attention to your body, you will notice that right now. And so in our society, we are not taught, we're not encouraged to tune in to these inner states. We don't quite know how to be with our inner states, with the communication with our bodies outside of what I've mentioned earlier, right? I need to go to the bathroom, or I am hungry, or I have a headache, right? Those are the ways that we may be, or we may know to tune in, but to be with our bodies in a much more expansive ways, or in a more consistent way that may be unfamiliar to us. And so we may not know how to make sense of this present moment inner experience. So here's an exercise to promote that inner awareness of our present moment experience. I've mentioned it now a couple of times in this talk, but it's simply what I call to check in. And this is actually something that I pretty much do with all my clients early on in therapy, and that I actually encourage them to practice, and that I check in if they're practicing it. Again, less so as a homework and as something that they have to do, but I encourage them because I see a lot of value in it. And clients that really take to it, their inner experience, their relationship with their inner experience begins to transform. So, what is the exercise? So, it's simply cultivating, again, that turning the mirror, that asking of oneself, how am I doing? How is my body doing right now? Now, this is not a moment to interpret, right? Oh, so I'm feeling the sensation here. This must mean X, Y, Z. Instead, I invite the client to suspend the interpretation and to rather just stay with the curiosity of being with the fullness of that particular sensation. And so I often offer the client questions that they can, again, elaborate as they check in with how am I doing, is things like, am I tired? Am I heavy? Am I alive? Am I feeling grounded, centered? Am I feeling pain or discomfort or disconnection from my body? Or am I feeling any discomfort within? Yeah. If the client can turn inward and sustain curiosity, you can invite them to see what it's like to be with these sensations, what thoughts come up, what feelings come up. Again, this is building on mindfulness of their inner experience while suspending judgment about it. This is simply an exercise of building into that inner awareness of what we call present moment experience. Another wonderful exercise that I like and that I highly recommend is orienting exercises. And orienting exercises are about feeling into our surrounding, feeling into the space and the thing around us. When we are in touch with our surroundings, we tend to be more regulated. Yeah. And conversely, the opposite is true. When we're anxious or when we're fearful, we tend to be very disconnected from our surroundings, right? We naturally do this. So think about when you go to a restaurant or when you go to a movie theater, chances are that you orient to the exits, right? Like where's the exit? Where is the bathroom? Or when we visit a new city, what is the first thing you typically do? You look at your map or you look at your GPS to find what your location. In fact, I can tell you, that when I go around my house and I have the privilege of having a car, even places that I am already familiar with, somehow I even put the GPS, which I don't really need it, but somehow it helps my nervous system to have a GPS that is going to give me a sense of time and also the best route to actually get there. Something about having that GPS, even if I know how to get home, actually helps me settle. It helps me feel more oriented, to feel more grounded. So then you can bring an orienting exercise into your practice, and this can be very, very helpful with anxious and also with depressed clients, right? So a very simple exercise is to look around the room. Yeah, you find this exercise in sensory motor psychotherapy, and you also find it in somatic experiencing, and they're also found in any somatic psychotherapeutic modalities. Yeah. So orienting, helping the client orient to the space around them. So the instruction is quite simple. Is you tell the client, right? So just bring your head all the way to the side of your head as far as it can go, and just notice your surroundings. And now I want you to scan the room, just orienting, noticing the things that are in this room as you very slowly and gently bring your head all the way to the others. And then we do this a couple of times. Just go around the room, just noticing what is around you, right? If you have a very anxious client, it may be helpful to support them a little bit more by adding things such as, notice the things that grab your attention around the space, or notice the things that you don't like. Or you may instruct them to notice shapes, to notice the size of things, to notice colors. Yeah. So again, you're making it a little bit more specific. And by making it more specific, your client may be, again, here you're giving them a menu. Your client may be able to orient more specifically to the things that you're inviting them to look out for, right? You can be even more direct, which could be very helpful to anxious clients. And then you can say things like, as you look around the space, name three green things. right? Or name three blue things, or three black things, right? Or three things that have a round shape, or that have a square shape, or a rectangular shape, right? So now we're being very directive. That again helps contain the exercise and support the client in being more in relationship to the orienting, right? Also anticipate a couple of one thing, and then another one is a suggestion. Anticipate that with anxious clients, they're going to do something like this. They're going to look around and they're going to do this, yeah, because their energy, right, again, is quite up, and they're very disconnected, typically from their bodies and from their surroundings, right? So you want to instruct them to do it slowly, and as I said earlier, you want to model it for them first, and as they're doing it, you're doing it together with them, and you're inviting them as they're engaging in this orienting exercise. What's it like inside? What shifts? What do you notice now? Is this helpful? Or one of my favorite questions that I learned from my colleague, Janina Fisher: does this make you feel better or worse? Yeah. I yet had a client that cannot orient to better or worse. As you do this orienting exercise, does this make you feel better or worse? And the last thing that I also want to name around this exercise is to invite clients to look behind them, right? We are orienting to what's behind us, we tend to feel safer, right? So the initial explanation and instruction for this exercise is to scan the horizon, but also invite clients to look behind them, because that supports sensing into safety. Our backs tend to be more connected to safety. Yeah. So this is an orienting exercise. So now I want to move to a third exercise, and this is grounding exercise. Grounding exercises are about anchoring, about rooting our bodies into the ground and feeling into the connection with the earth. When we are in states of dysregulation, being in states of anxiety or anger, or conversely into a more hypoaroused states of depression, of shutdown and dissociation, we tend to be ungrounded, right? We are not only disconnected from our bodies, but we are also disconnected from the earth, from the ground beneath it, from a feeling of rootedness, right? So grounding exercises could be very helpful in helping reconnect the client not only with the ground beneath them, but also in doing so, feeling more connected with their body, and therefore shifting or challenging some of that automaticity of those dysregulated states. And so, what is the instruction for this particular grounding exercise? Is again to just bring attention to your feet. Our feet are the representation of our bodies connected to the earth, and we use the imagination with this exercise, and you invite the client to feel their feet as anchors into the ground beneath them. If you are in a building, imagine your feet developing roots that go through the floor beneath you, that find the ground. Feel into the roots growing out of your feet, and through the various floors, finding the ground, finding the earth. Now, invite the client to press their feet gently into the ground and feeling into the muscles that are engaged in the process: their calves, their ankles, their toes, their their quads, their buttocks, right? And invite them to hold them for a moment, right, while they press, and then to release, and to do it again a few times. Again, press with your feet and then release, right? As I said earlier, you can instruct them to rock their feet back and forth and side to side, and all the while asking them, what do you notice now? What happens as you engage with this exercise? Does it make you feel better? Right? Because these exercises are meant to bring in regulation, we tend to go for better. We tend to go for resourcing. If they lead to greater dysregulation, you abort, you discontinue this exercise, and you say something like, then we don't have to do it. That's okay. Let's try something else, right? Or would you be willing to try something else? Sometimes it may feel like throwing spaghetti at, at the wall. That's okay. That's what these somatic exercises are meant to do, to build a tool bag that you, the therapist, can draw upon, and that also the client, as they practice on their own, they can have available to them. Also, let the client know that none of these exercise are meant to be our end all, solve all, or a silver bullet. They may work sometimes, and other times they don't, and that's okay. That does not mean that you or the therapist or the client is doing anything wrong, but rather that much as with everything else in your life, sometimes I like, more tea than coffee, right? Or chocolate than vanilla, and that's okay. Yeah. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes we have a preference for one thing or for the other. So now I want to share with you a centering exercise, and this will be the fourth and last somatic exercise that I want you to know in this workshop. So, centering exercises are about feeling into our core, our sense of integrity and embodiment, feeling embodied, right? Once again, when we're in states of distress, we feel ungrounded, right? We feel disembodied. We feel disconnected from our bodies, and therefore we feel uncentered, right? And one expression that you hear clients and that you probably have used yourself is, being all over the place, right? So when I hear a client say, "I feel that all over the place," or when I myself feel like I'm all over the place, I think of needing more centering, right? Or that centering is kind of out of kilter right now, right? So bringing in the somatic exercise of centering can actually be very, very helpful, right? So if you've ever taken a yoga class, right, think of it tree pose or mountain pose. These poses are very much used in yoga, and they're all around alignment. If you're not familiar with those yoga poses, they're essentially about feeling into the alignment or of our body. Centering and alignment go hand in hand. And alignment has to do with our spine and with our core. So mountain pose or tree pose in yoga are about feeling into that alignment. So you don't have to be a yoga instructor to actually bring this to therapy. So if we were to do it right now, one easy way to do that is again to roll the shoulders back and down and feeling into the alignment. Yeah, that immediately kind of comes about. You may instruct the client or yourself, if you're doing it with me, to sense into the vertebra stacked one on top of another one, right? There's something regal about this posture, right? And just almost sensing the pull, right? The pull from the top of your head as if something was gently pulling you, again, without strain, but holding that posture at a place that feels comfortable to you. So notice the alignment. And what's that like now? What do you notice in your body as you hold that at that pose? Yeah? And even as I do it with you now, I can sense a slight shift within me as as I do it. There's something about the movement of energy within my body that happens more easily than if I was sort of slouched like this, as it often happens with depressed clients, or if I was all over the place thinking and feeling various things, right? So, again, this is yet another very simple exercise that can be brought in with any therapeutic framework that I find abundantly helpful, that I would encourage you all to try on your own so that you have more of a familiarity and also confidence in these exercises. So you're not just kind of suggesting them out there, but that they actually you have a first-hand sense of how helpful they can be for you. Yeah. And then also for your clients. So, y'all, this has been a wonderful experience to be here with you and to share a little bit about bringing in the soma, the body, that body awareness into practice, and then ending with some very, very specific exercises that, again, you can integrate into any therapeutic modality that you are practicing. So I wish you all well. And once again, it's been a pleasure being with you here today. All the very best to you in your practice. Thank you.